Good evening and welcome to Watchmen on the Wall. Thank you for joining us. With me in the studio to host the program tonight is Michelle Links. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Errol, and thank you for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. Tonight we're going to be addressing the topic of human trafficking in South Africa, and in particular the Anti Trafficking Bill, or rather the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill that has been stuck in Parliament for the past 4 years. We have made several inquiries about why this bill has been so delayed, but have not been successful to get a proper answer yet. And so we've invited Steve Swart, the ACDP Member of Parliament, and he serves on the Justice Portfolio Committee, to talk to us about where this bill is, the status of this bill, and when we can expect it to be finalized and signed into law. We're also going to talk to Marge Ballin of Inter Outreach Ministries. Marge has been working on the street for more than 25 years, helping women out of prostitution and also rescuing women out of trafficking situations. And she will give us a unique perspective of what is happening on the streets with women and young girls. We're also going to talk to JP Smith. He's the head of safety and security in the city of Cape Town. JP, of course, has the Vice Squad, and the Vice Squad has been very successful in Cape Town, busting illegal brothels, rescuing women out of prostitution, and arresting members of crime syndicates that enslave women and girls in human trafficking and prostitution. Now, Michelle, we don't understand the situation. Many people are concerned. We get emails at Family Policy Institute about the anti-trafficking bill. Why has it not been finalized? And why people are so concerned is that almost every week there is a report in the media about trafficking in South Africa. A young girl is being trafficked, a number of girls has been trafficked. So trafficking, human trafficking, especially for prostitution,
Yes.
is a problem that appears not to be going away and is growing in South Africa.
Yes, I would agree. It's definitely on the increase, the same as drugs. It's become a lucrative business in South Africa.
That's right.
And more younger and younger kids are being sold into sex slavery, because human trafficking is sex slavery, nothing more than that.
Absolutely.
And it's actually quite sad as what's happening, and the reason why the bill has been stuck. I mean, does it have to get closer to home for people's eyes actually to open up?
That's an interesting question, because that's what we've been communicating to Parliament, and we've done 2 protests outside Parliament. Outside Parliament, we also moved that around to Mavericks, because we believe Mavericks is a strip club, yes, where a lot of trafficking is happening and abuse of women and young girls. And we've had that protest. We have women, you know, in broken clothes, makeup to illustrate bruises and, yes, bleeding lips, with placards standing in front of Parliament saying that women are not sex objects, and pass the TIP bill, TIP bill being the Trafficking in Persons Bill. Yeah. We've done that twice. We asked to speak to somebody at the Department of Justice to hand over a memorandum. They refused to come out. So Steve Swart, we'll be speaking to later, he came out and he received the memorandum on behalf of Parliament. You're a pastor in a church. Are you, and where your church is located in the city of Cape Town, it's where prostitution is happening. Yes. Are you getting any feedback of trafficking issues? What are the people saying that you minister to?
Yeah, well, Errol, it's actually quite rife in the Bellville area. Where we're located, prostitutes walk up and down during the day. Actually, just up the road from us, behind there's a block of flats where we have lots of Northern African people that are living there. And we actually had an experience where one of the guys came to speak to my husband and said to him that he's trying to get out of this business, but he can't, because he would get killed, he would be murdered.
That's right.
He has to stay there. It's kind of a family business. And it's during the day, it's not even at night. And sometimes if you drive in the back roads, you will see that these girls wait for their clients at the back of the roads. It's actually quite bad. Another story that I heard that was quite moving was in the Atlantis area, where there was a mom that sold a child,
That's right.
I think it was for 200 Rand for alcohol. I think that story really moved me.
Now, that is the reason, Michelle, why we are pushing for the Anti-Trafficking Bill to be passed in the National Council of Provinces. That's where it's at currently, and to be signed into law by President Jacob Zuma, because the quicker we can get this law signed and implemented, the better it will be for everybody, because we have no intelligence in South Africa on human trafficking. So nobody can say with certainty how many trafficking cases there are, because we don't have the proper intelligence. But we have to assume, by the reports in the media, there's a lot of it is happening. And that case of a mother selling a child horrified a lot of people. I know that. I got a lot of emails about that. And that is the thing that the Anti-Trafficking Bill, or the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill, will deal with, will address. And this is the most comprehensive bill we've had in Parliament to deal with trafficking in persons. And at the moment they're using the Sexual Offences Act and other bits of other bills to address the issue, but it's not doing the job. But I take your point that this is a sad and tragic situation in South Africa.
It is sad. You know, one of the scriptures that come to mind is the love of money is the root of all evil.
That's right.
And you know, most of these people it's for money, it's for business, and that's the scripture that sticks with me. You know, and maybe it comes from poverty in this country. It stems from poverty. There's unemployment. So what do people do? They sell off to get money. And there was one story that I heard of in the Bellville area, where a lady in our church, she stays in this block of flats, and she heard this child crying every day. And she said, you know, when a child cries, there's something that stirs up on the inside of you.
That's right.
And then she found out, why is this child crying? It was actually when the mom had to see one of her clients. The child had to be taken away, and the child started crying.
As the pride of the mother.
Exactly. So the mom has to work to provide for the child. And the mom can't get out, because where does she stay?
Michelle, there is so many tragic stories like that in South Africa. And that's why we're encouraging churches and Christians to start ministries to reach out to these women on the streets, to rescue them out of prostitution, because that's the only way we're going to get these women out if the church gets involved. But Michelle, thank you for that. And we just want to do a brief report back of our previous shows. The one is the top TV application for porn channels in South Africa, the 3 24-hour porn channels. The media reports that that application has elicited a record response from the public in South Africa. And we want to thank you, because we did the show on it and we asked people to write to Top TV and ICASA. Thousands have done so, and so they've got a record response, and we thank you for taking action, for responding in the way you did. And also the program we did on Peter Throp, and he's been prosecuted, of course, for putting value life stickers over illegal abortion adverts all over the city. And he reported to me that the city cannot remove the illegal adverts, abortion adverts on post boxes and telecom property, because that's their property and it doesn't belong to the city. And so what we're finding is that you have all these adverts all over the city advertising illegal abortion services that are killing people, but the city of Cape Town are powerless to do anything about this. And later on in the show, we want to give you an email address to write to and encourage the city of Cape Town to aggressively deal with this situation, because the lives of women and girls are at stake here. So stay tuned, don't go away, more after the break. Welcome back. With me in the studio is Steve Swart, the ACDP Member for Parliament and who serves on the Justice Portfolio Committee. Steve, welcome to the studio and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Errol, and my greetings to your viewers.
Steve, we're talking about the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill, and we have no idea why this bill, since it's been tabled in Parliament just before the World Cup in 2010, why it is still stuck in Parliament, in particular the National Council of Provinces. Can you help us understand this?
Yes, Errol, and I must say from our perspective, the ACDP, I've been pushing this bill and I'm very disappointed that it hasn't been passed yet. You'll recall that it was tabled in Parliament by the Minister in March 2010 in the run-up to the Soccer World Cup. We're now 3 years later, the bill has not been finalised yet. We worked very hard to push this bill through from the ACDP's perspective. At one stage, even after the Soccer World Cup, there was an indication from the ruling party that they weren't going to continue with it because, in their view, trafficking had not spiked during the World Cup. However, we insisted that they continue with this bill and that it should be continued.
Now, that's an incredible view because I've got some reports on human trafficking just this past few weeks, and we see human trafficking trial continues in KwaZulu-Natal. There's a human trafficking case in the Eastern Cape, in Durban, and just about all over the country. We have a recent one where a young girl of 11 years old was sold into sexual slavery. So I don't understand how Parliament can't see this as an urgent issue, especially considering the fact that it's so much in the media.
Absolutely. One of the views that is argued, which we don't necessarily agree with, is the fact that there is already legislation to deal with the perpetrator. That's why you see those cases coming forward.
But it's not comprehensive.
It is not comprehensive, and the victims are not dealt with properly, as is in terms of this legislation. And bear in mind, this legislation is required in terms of our international treaties. The Palermo Protocol, which the state president signed, and which he said will result in this comprehensive legislation, requires this. And therefore, it's in fact disgraceful that it hasn't been passed yet. We in the National Assembly, the Justice Committee, finalised this bill. The second half is the fact that it now has to be referred to the National Council of Provinces. And I was given the assurance there that it would be finalised by the end of last year.
Now you remember when we did the protest outside Parliament,
yes.
Family Policy Institute, we got the ladies out there, we protested, we handed a memorandum. You accepted
yes.
it on behalf of the Justice Department because
yes.
nobody from the Justice Department would come out to accept it. There they told us, that was last year, that the bill would be finalised at the end of 2012. Yes. By September 2012 it would
yes.
be finalised, then go to the President and be signed into law. And now that it's been passed on to the National Council of Provinces, we were also told, look, this is just it has to go to the National Council of Provinces. We've done all the work. We've spoken to everybody we needed to speak to. But now we find out that the National Council of Provinces wants to do everything the Justice Portfolio Committee has done in the National Assembly. Are we missing something here?
Well, I think in a certain respect, the National Council of Provinces is trying to flex its muscle and show that it's not just a rubber stamp of the National Assembly. So, however, they are spending so much time on other legislation, such as the very contentious Protection of State Information Bill, the Secrecy Bill, that they're not getting to this piece of legislation. So my question to the ruling parties, what are you prioritising? Are you prioritising things correctly? The public has correctly, as you've said, you've had demonstrations outside Parliament, and in my view, the ruling party is not prioritising this bill sufficiently, and I have tried to put pressure on them from my side, but bear in mind, we as the ACDP are an opposition party, and it is the ruling party that has to prioritise these issues. It's no good for the minister to go on television and media and say, yes, they are prioritising the combating of trafficking, when they are not doing it in Parliament.
Yeah, we try to get hold of the chairperson of the Select Committee on Security in the National Council of Provinces that's busy dealing with this bill. And amazingly, after several telephone calls, he wouldn't return our calls. We can't leave messages for him. We tried to get his secretary on the line. I spoke to the secretary of the committee, Mr. Dixon, but the public and the media is given the runaround, and it's disturbing, especially considering the fact that human trafficking is a growing problem and scourge in our nation. Many young girls and women's lives are at risk, and Parliament appears to be kicking this trafficking bill around without much urgency.
Absolutely, and I agree with you, and I think that the public needs to start sending letters to Parliament and start insisting that this legislation is finalised and asking, why is it taking so long for it to be passed, considering the high levels of human trafficking that we have in our nation? The other issue, of course, is we had the ruling party's Mangaung conference. So, so much of the work of Parliament and MPs were running around lobbying support groups, and hopefully now that that is behind us, we can start getting down to the business of what we are paid to do, and that is to pass legislation and exercise oversight.
Yeah, so finally, Steve, I want to ask you, is there anything in the bill? Now, you've gone through this bill with a fine-tooth comb in the Justice Portfolio Committee for more than 2 years.
Yes.
And there were so many things you had to do. You had to meet with Home Affairs and all kinds of NPA and all kinds of people to ensure that there are no glitches or loopholes in, and we appreciate that. Good work was done on the bill.
Yes.
Is there anything in that bill now that you can see that is preventing it from being passed?
Well, again, we're sitting with the issue of Home Affairs. You'll remember that the Department of Home Affairs came in and the Minister came in at a very late stage and said they are very concerned that illegal immigrants will say they've been trafficked and therefore abuse the system. So it could well be, I don't know what's going on at a cabinet level, it could well be that this issue is causing a delay. I would hope not, because we've already dealt with that issue in the Justice Portfolio Committee. And bear in mind, the Minister of Home Affairs sat at the Cabinet when this bill was approved. And that was prior to it being tabled in Parliament. So we already have expressed our regrets that she came, or at that stage, yes, it's still a she, that the Minister of Home Affairs came in at a very late stage and objected to the bill when she had the chance at Cabinet level to express her reservations and ensure that the Cabinet draft was in accordance with what she believed. So we trust that that isn't a problem now. I heard from the Department of Justice that they had given a full briefing to the National Council of Provinces Select Committee dealing with this, and that it's an issue now of being passed in the first term of this year. But bear in mind now it's budget process, so we're all dealing with the budget. And my concern is, again, that it might be kicked out further.
It's going to go on the black
and that is my concern. Yeah. So again, I would urge you to keep up social activism from your side. I think it's very important to keep up the pressure on the ruling party to pass this very important piece of legislation.
Steve Swart, thank you once again for coming into the Watchmen on the Wall studio to speak to us and updating us about the bill. And we will keep up the pressure on Parliament. You can be sure of that.
Thank you, and it's always a pleasure to be with you, Errol, and keep up the good work from your side.
We will. Welcome back. With me in the studio is JP Smith, the Head of Safety and Security in the City of Cape Town. JP has launched the Vice Squad in Cape Town, and they have been very successful in raiding illegal brothels in the city, rescuing women out of trafficking situations, and also arresting the pimps and the crime syndicates who prey on these vulnerable women. JP, thank you for joining us at Watchmen on the Wall and for the work you're doing.
It's a pleasure.
We want to talk about trafficking in particular. We know the prostitution is a huge issue in Cape Town and in South Africa, and also that prostitution appears to be the pull factor for trafficking. Are you seeing it that way?
I think that's what mainly trafficked girls end up, in many cases, end up doing. We see trafficking for sexual and non-sexual purposes. There's a certain degree of trafficking around domestic workers as well, where people are lured from poor, predominantly platteland, rural communities to the city. But the bulk of it is, or much of it is, sexually related. And what the Vice Squad has been focusing on is specifically sexually related. There's 22 young women so far that we've had dealings with, where we've removed them from an environment where they claim to have been held against their will. In many of these cases, it's been explicitly clear that they've been drugged or kept against their will for various lengths of time, as long as 7 months in one case.
Is this 22 women you guys, the Vice Squad has rescued out of trafficking situations?
That's just what the Vice Squad has done. Now, can I say, when we're new arrivals on the scene, what our relative contribution compared to what places like Inter Outreach Ministries and many of the other NGOs have done over many, many years, that's really valuable. valuable work. We've just arrived on the scene yesterday, and we create some of the push factor because we're going out on the street and encountering the women and their pimps and creating some of the push, encouraging women to come off the street, and where they indicate a willingness to do so, trying to connect them to the NGOs. The NGOs are the ones that really add the value here. We are just some of the interface.
I know, but now just for our viewers' information, how long has the Vice Squad been operating in the city of Cape Town?
It's a little bit over 2 years now.
Over 2 years, but
so to say 22 cases in 2 years, it's not a huge number, but I suspect we are only detecting a very small percentage of the cases.
And we've read in the media, we've read of cases where you guys have actually rescued young women out of trafficking situations, got them into the safe houses to be protected. Now, we're talking about the Anti-Trafficking Bill and the fact that it's still stuck in Parliament, has not been finalized or signed into law. And we were speaking to Steve Swart earlier, who's a member of the Justice Portfolio Committee, and he was telling us that some of the members of the Justice Portfolio Committee don't believe that trafficking is really a growing problem or such an urgent issue that they have to fast-track this legislation through Parliament. Is that what you're seeing on the streets?
No, sir. And somebody who doesn't understand that needs to come and join the Vice Squad or the Hawks on the street for a bit and come and do one of these operations, come and see what's going on. You have young women who are lured from rural environments. Most often, we see them also particularly from Bloemfontein, PE, Johannesburg, being brought here thinking that they're coming for a modeling or some fashion-related job, something that sounds glamorous, and then the job here is substantially less glamorous in the end. We find them detained under the influence of drugs, having to perform sexual acts for remuneration or without, and where the remuneration, in 2 of these cases that I brought you specifically, where all the remuneration is taken. So they're not seeing any of those proceeds. They're kept under drugs. They're forced to do other tasks like bagging drugs, etc. They're kept in extremely unsanitary conditions, often not fed properly. It's appalling conditions under which they are detained. So this is not a matter which you could classify as not urgent unless the plight of these women is irrelevant to you.
Yeah. Now the organizations and the syndicates involved in trafficking, are they local or international?
Both, but without targeting anybody, and I'm always nervous to do this, without targeting anybody. I mean, if I read through the cases to you, you'll see that there is a common...
Give us some examples.
Nigerian national, 2 women, 23 and 19 years old, originally from Johannesburg, forced to take drugs, not provided with food, kept in extremely unhygienic conditions, who were rescued. Parksig Villas, also a young woman, 16 years old, under the influence of drugs, went with a friend of hers to a guy in this flat, a Nigerian guy who had money. She was kept there, given drugs, later on forced to commit to prostitute and to commit sexual acts for men, friends of his, forced to bag drugs, dropped out of school and was rescued. So there's a common denominator in many of this, and that there are certain elements amongst the foreign nationals who enjoy refugee status in our country, who see this as a lucrative form of earning an income using our young women.
And tell me, what is the success rate with South African police services been as far as breaking down these syndicates?
I think with the police in general, with the grassroots or at the station level, not good. There the police often have a completely hands-off approach. And in fact, many of the prostitutes accuse those police members continuously. While I've been out on operations, we've even seen vehicles come around and become extremely anxious when they see us talking to the prostitutes, because presumably they're worried that the prostitutes will expose them. So not good at station level. Where we are getting good cooperation is with the Hawks, who are doing a variety of operations with our Vice Squad and with the National Prosecuting Authority, individuals within the NPA who take this very seriously and are making a good effort.
So in your expert opinion and your oversight as the head of safety and security here in the city of Cape Town, would you say that trafficking, especially in the sex industry, is increasing, or do you see it plateauing out?
No, I think we're seeing a pretty consistent degree of it. But I don't need to hear that it's increasing for it to be a problem. What we're seeing is enough of a problem. 22 women in 2 years, for me, is more than adequate a problem. I don't need it to be 60 women or 100 women.
And what are
Those
the ages?
22 women are of great concern to me as it is.
What are their ages?
16 to 35 years old, generally from poor backgrounds. This is women who are being victimized. They're vulnerable, they're desperate for employment. So they are really preying on the vulnerable, and often the very young. And the conditions that they find themselves in is atrocious. I mean, this is akin to slavery. There is no nice way to talk about this. And whatever national government can do on this, they need to do with and expeditiously. They need to get on with it.
And that's what the subject matter is about. It's about prevention and combating of trafficking in persons. And this is the most comprehensive piece of legislation to address this issue.
Absolutely.
And we've seen some of the cases that you've brought to court. As far as trafficking is concerned, the people are getting away with murder, literally, because we don't have the proper legislation in place to deal and address this problem effectively. But JP, we want to thank you once again for the work of the Vice Squad, your commitment to arresting and prosecuting these syndicates, and thank you for coming to talk to us in the studio here at Watchmen on the Wall.
Errol, it's a pleasure. And perhaps just one thing that we can debunk, there is the myth that all the trafficking happens in the Hollywood style. You know, you see women being taken and transported internationally. While we've seen some Chinese girls, Mozambican, Zambian and Zimbabwean women, it's very few. What we're predominantly seeing is local trafficking. It's girls from within South Africa being trafficked. These are our own residents, our own people from rural areas to cities and to a couple of predictable hotspots. So if you give it only that glamorous perspective, it is easy for people to think, oh, this is some kind of Hollywood myth. If you understand the local dynamic to it and you strip the sort of Hollywood element from it, there is a very real problem, and it's our own people, vulnerable people from within our country that are being exploited.
Point taken, JP. More after the break. Please don't go away. Welcome back. With us in the studio is Marge Ballin of Inter-Outreach Ministries. Now, Marge has been involved in rescuing women and young girls out of prostitution and trafficking situations for the past 25 years. And nobody's got a better perspective of what is happening on our streets than Marge Ballin. Marge, welcome to the Watchmen on the Wall studios, and thank you for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.
Marge, we're talking about the Anti Trafficking Bill and the fact that it's been delayed so long in Parliament. It's been tabled just before the World Cup. You know that. You've been doing a lot of work on that. But it hasn't been finalized. It's now stuck in the National Council of Provinces. And we spoke to Steve Swart of the ACDP, who served on the Justice Portfolio Committee. And he says there's people in Parliament that don't believe that trafficking is really a growing crime. What is your perspective?
I think it definitely is. I think it's growing internationally, but definitely even in South Africa it is growing. And
you work with women that are involved in safe houses, helping women exit prostitution. You've retired now, but you've had a safe house for how many years?
This particular one I had for 13 years.
For 13 years.
I have run ones previously to that as well.
And you've also worked in the red light district in Amsterdam. So you've got a good understanding of what is happening in South Africa. And as far as trafficking is concerned, are you concerned?
I'm very concerned.
Why are you concerned?
Well, because it is escalating, because it is said to be the third largest money-making crime in the world, next to weapons and guns. It's for the traffickers, it's an easy way to make money.
Yeah.
So it is something that is going to escalate, definitely.
And you're seeing that happening in South Africa?
Definitely.
Now, we've spoken to JP Smith as well, and he operates the Vice Squad here in Cape Town, and he's saying they've had 22 cases over the last 2 years, but that is just 22 cases that the law enforcement knows about. How many cases are there that the law doesn't know about, that are still happening underground? And you're very familiar with that, because your work was rescuing women.
That's right.
And keeping them in a safe house. And what is the reason you'd keep them in a safe house?
Well, first of all, for their own safety, but also to rehabilitate them. We took them through a program helping them to deal with their issues of abuse and hurt and dysfunction. And then if it was possible, once they had done our program, which was 6 months long, and if there were finances available, then we would help them to do skills training. and help them to get proper jobs.
Because that's the best way to get
Yes.
them out of the sex industry, is
Yes.
by giving them an alternative sort of skills basis
That's right.
to go and take care of themselves. Now, was there ever a situation where the crime syndicates or the PIMs that usually control these women, was there ever a situation where they came after them?
I had one situation where in the safe house, one of our ladies had actually left her baby with drug dealers, and she kidnapped him back when he was 5 years old. So we had drug dealers and gangsters at the door demanding this child back. So, because they'd had him since he was very small, I had to get a social worker involved, and she said, well, you know, she is the biological mother, and the fact that we could prove that she was working on her life meant that she could keep the child. So, but we've dealt with a lot of issues out there as well. A woman who, for instance, was in prison, she was brought, I think she was from Kenya, if I remember. She was brought under false pretenses to South Africa, told that she was going to be employed, put into prostitution. Then she was taken by this group. What they do is they sometimes get them jobs as domestic workers. She had a job for a very wealthy woman, and then they came and they robbed this woman.
Oh, is this the syndicates that control?
A syndicate came and robbed the woman while she was away on holiday. When she came back, she blamed the girl. The girl landed up in prison. Long story, I got involved because I heard about this. They tried to get a lawyer to deal with it. By the time they eventually got a lawyer, a Christian lawyer actually, to get to the prison to help her, she had already been removed by the same crime syndicates.
Wow.
So, I mean, and she was working under a Nigerian madam, and she said that there were lots of women. So, yes, they're all over. In the suburbs, there are houses that are being used. There are drug dens that are being used where they're feeding them drugs and forcing them out to do prostitution.
This is all trafficked situations where...
Not necessarily. Some of them are just prostitutes, but I'm sure that a lot of them are trafficked.
But would you say, with your years of experience, that most of these women are controlled by PIMs or syndicates or gangs?
A lot of them are. A lot of them are.
And if you're going to help get them out, you have to deal with that situation as well. And so you must have a safe house.
You've got to have a safe house.
Because if you're rescuing a woman out of prostitution, and J.B. Smith was telling us earlier, because once they rescue these women out of these situations, they don't know what to do with them.
Yes.
Because they can't put them in a prison cell. They need the help. And so the next question is, do you think the church is doing enough to address this situation of prostitution, trafficking? What should they be doing, Marge?
I feel that they should be coming alongside of organizations that are doing it, helping them financially, providing workers. You know, for a number of years that I was doing it, there was just 2 organizations that were actively involved. That was Inter Outreach Ministry, which I was running, which I started, and Straatweg. Yeah. You've had Marjorie on the program.
That's right.
I have trained a lot of people who are now starting safe houses and getting involved, but they're struggling. There's a tremendous struggle to get finances and to get workers. So I do believe that the church should get more actively involved. Absolutely.
I believe so too. They can pray, and churches can start ministries that can go out onto the streets.
It is starting to happen though, Errol. For instance, Straatweg has trained a lot of groups in a lot of areas that are going out.
That's encouraging to hear.
But unfortunately, there are not enough safe houses.
That's right, because you need the safe houses if you're taking the women off the street.
Yes, where do they put them?
And we're going to hope and pray that churches are going to establish more safe houses, because as these women come off the streets, and some of them voluntarily want to come out of it because of the abuse, but that there's always a safe place, a loving place for them to go to.
There's also a need for crisis centres. There is,
That's right.
there are a couple of them that are possibly starting, where girls can be taken immediately when they've been rescued.
When they're taken off the streets, yeah.
I had a girl brought by J.P. Smith, or one of the Vice Squad group, one night, 12 o'clock at night. They brought this girl, and she was controlled by a Nigerian.
And she's obviously in a bad state.
Yes,
So she needs
and she was 4 months pregnant as well.
4 months pregnant as well, being prostituted,
Yes,
full of drugs.
yes.
What a tragedy. Marge, we want to thank you for the years that you've sowed into this ministry, the many women that you have helped, rescued, saved, led them to the Lord, and you still, even though you retired, you're still continuing to train others to do this work.
I'm doing that consultancy and mentoring and training, yes.
Yeah, thank God for people like you, and we hope that you will raise up more people to get involved in this ministry because it's so needed. Once again, Marge, thank you for coming to the studio and speaking to us.
It's a pleasure.
More after the break. Please don't go away. Welcome back. Joining us this afternoon at the Watchmen on the Wall studio and via Skype is Paul Ramaloko, the spokesperson or the national spokesperson for the Hawks based in Johannesburg. Paul, welcome to Watchmen on the Wall and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks and hello to your viewers.
Paul, we are talking about the Anti Trafficking Bill, or better known as the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill in Parliament. Now, this bill has been in Parliament for more than 3 years and people are very concerned about the delay in the bill. We've had discussions with a number of parliamentarians and some of them believe that trafficking is not such a serious problem in South Africa. What is the view of the Hawks?
Yeah, we are saying that trafficking indeed it is a challenge, and however, at the moment, when we suspect of people of being trafficked, we will normally have these people charged for alternative crimes since the legislation is still underway.
So are you saying that the fact that the anti-trafficking bill is not finalized and signed into law, is it presenting or posing a problem to the work of the Hawks to prosecute and investigate trafficking crimes?
Even though the legislation itself is not finalized, but we still find ourselves being able to do the work. However, in the same breath, we are saying if the legislation is finalized, then the work will be more simpler and faster.
And are you guys gathering intelligence to be able to give a proper account of what is happening as far as this crime is concerned?
We do have our intelligence into that direction, and we are not taking the issue of trafficking light. We are taking it serious like any other crime.
The next question then is, from the Hawks perspective and everything that you've been seeing on the ground around the country, is do you believe trafficking is on the increase in South Africa?
It's not within my mandate to be talking about statistics, but I can say we do have forces in place to cut the scale.
Paul Ramaloko, thank you for joining us here at Watchmen on the Wall. Thank you for your insights, and we hope that you guys are going to be very successful in combating trafficking, because we believe that it's a serious crime that affects all South Africans. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we really appreciate being given the opportunity to present our part.
Thanks, Paul.
Hi, we're standing here in Government Avenue in the Cape Town Gardens. We want to ask the people what they think about the fact that the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill has been stuck in Parliament for the past 4 years. All while men, women and children have been trafficked into, in and around South Africa, mainly for prostitution. Do you think trafficking is a problem in South Africa?
I think it's a big problem because it's not how we want other countries to view us, and I think that it's not right.
I don't actually know what the trafficking situation is in the country.
It's a it's a huge problem, a massive problem.
Yes, it is. Definitely it is.
I think that it is a big problem because also it's about people's rights.
It's not right for the people to tell people that they can come apply for jobs like domestic workers, but when they get there they feed them drugs and to sell them to other people for prostitute.
Not sure. So you think that Parliament should put a rush on getting the legislation enacted?
Yes.
I think that's really sad that our country's going nowhere with that, because it's ruining the lives of young people, and then other people seeing it, and then they only know that way. And if we as a country is not going to do anything to help it, it's never going to change. They're going to be stuck in this, and it's not nice. There's so much potential for people to do other stuff.
I think that's very bad. If the government is aware of a situation, then I think they should step in and do something about it.
Definitely, they should.
I had like a few years ago. I was almost one of those girls that they use for human trafficking. I stayed in Mitchell's Plain, so I was in town centre, and a few native guys, a lady blew something in my eye, and it's like she was drowsing me, and then they just walked away with me. So honestly, my opinion, if somebody didn't get me, I would have also been one of them. So it's really becoming a serious problem, and I think the government is doing absolutely nothing to stop this.
Welcome back. We're talking about the anti-trafficking bill that's been delayed in Parliament for the past 4 years. Now, this bill is currently stuck in the National Council of Provinces, which is being dealt with by the Select Committee on Safety and Security. But at the bottom of your screen right now is an email address that we want you to write to. Now, Michelle, we've spoken to JP Smith of the Vice Squad in the City of Cape Town. We've also spoken to Steve Swart, who's a Member of Parliament and serves on the Justice Portfolio Committee that dealt with this bill at length. We've also spoken to Marge Ballon of Inter Outreach Ministries, and having spoken to the three of them, we have to come to the conclusion that human trafficking is not going away, and it is a serious problem facing this country.
And it reminds me of a scripture, Proverbs 3, actually 31, verse 8 to 9, that says that we need to speak up for those that are treated unjustly. And
That's
I think
right.
it's time that the church rises up. We have a voice to speak on behalf of those kids and women that don't have a voice. So I would encourage churches and Christians to take a stronger stand against this increasing lucrative thing
Scourge.
Scourge that's happening at the moment. And yeah, it's really sad and heartbreaking as a mom, especially for me as a female, when I hear about stories like that. Oh, it just rips me to pieces.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with you more, because one of the issues we deal with at Family Policy Institute is obviously informing and educating the body of Christ out there, so that they could be well informed and equipped to take action, especially in situations like this.
Yeah.
And we've had protests outside Parliament. We had young women standing there with placards saying, "Pass the tip bill, women are not sex objects," and things like that. But it doesn't appear to have had any effect on Parliament. And so we need more. And what I have found, even with this porn application with Top TV, is that when the public speaks up, just as you've said, when the church rises up and firstly prays, and then begins to act, writing to Parliament, writing to these organizations, that it does have an impact. It does have an influence on them and the way people view these things. Because Parliament, Top TV, whoever, ICASA, whoever the organization is, if people are not writing to them, or speaking, or faxing, or doing whatever they need to do, they have to assume that we're okay with it. It's like the law, that the ruling of the Pretoria High Court that was passed recently, legalizing sex between children between the ages of 12 and 16. Now, if the Justice Department do not receive tons of emails from concerned citizens in South Africa, they would feel that people are okay with it. South Africans are okay with it, so we have to act. And so again, I want to ask South Africans, the church out there, if you're viewing this program, an email address will come up at the bottom of your screen. Please write. We urge you to write to the Select Committee at the National Council of Provinces and encourage them. Be polite, but be firm. Encourage them that we need this bill, the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill. We need it finalized. We need it passed into law. It has spent too much time in Parliament. And even Steve Swart, a member of Parliament, is saying that this is unacceptable. So we're not being unreasonable here. We want to protect women and children. Thousands of women and children, vulnerable women and children, lives are at risk because we have international syndicates operating in this country.
Yeah, and as we heard, it's actually not even international people. It's ladies and kids from rural areas, which is scary. You know, to think that these people are sold under, well, brought into the city under false pretenses, it's really, really heartbreaking.
And then sold into sexual slavery. Now, that is what this bill deals with. It's the most comprehensive bill addressing the issue of human trafficking. And they're using parts of the Sexual Offences Act and other bits of legislation to deal with this problem. But it's not obviously doing justice to the issue. We need the anti-trafficking bill to be finalized and signed into law. We need it implemented. We need our police trained properly so that we can begin to effectively and comprehensively protect women and children in South Africa. So, Michelle, I want to thank you once again for helping me host the show. This is your first time.
Yes.
And you've done a great job. So we're going to see more of you in the future.
Thanks.
We want to thank you for joining us tonight. And if you have a comment or suggestion for the show, please write to info@familypolicyinstitute.com. And if you haven't subscribed to our newsletters, the way I communicate with the church at large in South Africa is through the newsletter. So if you haven't, if you're not receiving our newsletter and you want to subscribe, please go to www.familypolicyinstitute.com. Click on the subscribe icon and fill in your name, surname, and email address so you can get our weekly updates. Once again, thank you for joining us tonight. Remember to keep on praying into this issue. It is a very important issue. We've got to win the battle in South Africa over prostitution and human trafficking. God bless you, and remember to keep on standing.